unfortunately, my mother stabbed my father, and yeah, he had to be hospitalised over that. Man, that's where I met a lot of the older criminals that, I eventually become really good friends with. As I said at the start, being housed with all these older criminals all the time, being bashed and tortured and abused every day, and used my lived experience to try and project that positive energy back into the community.
Young soldier of God, steady march.
Yo, it's your boy Dave here, and this is The Felon Show. Hope all is going well out there. God bless you all. How about you introduce yourself, brother, and where you're from?
How you going, Dave? It's finally good to meet you, man. My name's Caine Richardson. I'm just turned 34 years old. I'm from Launceston in Tasmania. Yeah, basically, I've been sharing my story and my journey over the last nearly 4 years since I was released from prison in 2019 in November. And yeah, basically, man, my story is just one of, hardship, dysfunctional family, someone that ended up on the wrong side of the law. And, unfortunately, it took a really long time for me to get back on the right track, nearly 21 years of offending and being incarcerated in juvenile detention and adult prison.
Oh, well, brother. Oh, well, man. I mean, first of all, man, it's good to have you on the show, Caine.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, no, welcome to The Felon Show, bro. I mean, you're the first one I've had on from Tassie, from old Tasmania. So, it's definitely good to have you on. I've actually checked out your story and, seen your podcast that you've done. Sorry, bro, what was that podcast again?
Darren Petty podcast.
The Darren Petty podcast. Yeah, so I checked you out on there, man, and bro, well done. That was an awesome interview. I'll leave a link. I'll leave the link in the description. It's like 3 hours long, but it's good, man. It was very insightful. Obviously, I didn't know much about the Tasmanian prison system or the politics or anything like that. So yeah, it was very insightful to see all of that, bro, and what you've gone through and what you've been able to overcome, because obviously it's a story of redemption. So there's a good news. It's a good news story. Don't worry.
It's a happy Tuesday, everyone.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's definitely a good news story in the end. But it was pretty shocking, man, that podcast to see what you've gone through over there in Tassie. It's pretty bad over there. Oh well, they'll fix it up a little bit nowadays, have they? In the last few years or something.
Yeah, slowly getting better, mate. They're building more facilities and, yeah, sort of spreading out the facilities as well, whereas mainly all the adult system prisons were down in the south. Now they're considering building one in the north.
Yeah,
and
okay. And that's the adult system. That's the adult system. Yeah. Because then you also say you've been to that Ashley's youth detention over there as well, and man, that was pretty horrific, bro.
Yeah, absolute shit, old mate. Shouldn't even be standing still. It's all I've done basically, man, is renovate and refurbish the same units that people my age and older have suffered serious crimes in, and I've just painted the place, renovated it, and just changed the insides of it. It's still the same buildings that were there 50 years ago.
Look, so Caine, it's good to have you on the show, bro. I mean, by all accounts, man, seeing your story and some of the news articles and things on you, bro, the reality is during your I guess tenure in that life, you've built a reputation as one of the most notorious criminals in Tasmania. Is that fair enough to say, bro? For some of the stuff that you've gone through and things like that?
100%, Dave. Yeah, at one point, or at a lot of points, over the last 4 years, I've been excellent. Don't get me wrong. I've been clean off of all the hard substances in general, but yeah, no reoffending, no relapsing, no gambling, none of the things that had sort of dragged me back to that lifestyle and that way of life every other time I've been released from custody. And, I was just one of the really lucky ones that, I made that decision the last time I was in prison to be exactly that. I wanted it to be the last time I ever stepped foot inside a prison as a prisoner. I come from that life, so when I see blokes like yourself doing this kind of thing, it's just like, I know how small of a percentage you are and you would be with your friend circle as well. You know, they I'm sure they support you doing good and you having a platform to share your story, and they support you 100%. But if you weren't doing it, they wouldn't be. Like, it's,
Yeah, no,
you
you
know,
know. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you know how it is. Yeah, you know how it
yeah,
is. But I mean, that's what the show's all about. You know what I mean? That's what it's all about. You know, I mean, anybody getting out of jail that sort of, you know, flicks on the show and sort of sees the guests and sees the stories can see like, oh well, this is legit. You know what I mean? Like, because that's what it's
100%.
that's who it's for. It's like my show's for everyone. You know what I mean? Even people that don't have a history and never even been in that life. But you know, really in my heart, you know, it's for the guys that's, you know, getting out of jail. You know what I mean? You
Trying to
know,
make it go.
yeah, just trying to make a go of it, and then they can see these stories because that's what I did. I mean, look, bro, again, it's good to have you on the show. You've been through a lot, you know, in your life, and I mean, bro, where did it start, man? In Tasmania, whereabouts?
Basically, man, I was born here in Launceston in Tasmania, and in the early years, so that first year and a half, I lived in my mother's care until my father and her had some difficulties, and yeah, my father ended up trying to take me from my mother. Yeah, that turned violent, and unfortunately my mother stabbed my father, and yeah, he had to be hospitalized over that. And yeah, by the time he got better, he come back and forcefully removed me from that house. And then, you know, I was nine, oh, what was I? I was 18, 19 months old at this point. So obviously I don't remember any of this. It's just what I've been told happened as when I was that young. And yeah, once my father removed me from my mother's care and my other siblings, I never actually seen them again until I was 9.5 years old. So the first year and a half I spent here in Launceston, but then yeah, once my father actually forcefully removed me from my mother's care, I grew up in Georgetown. From 1 to 10, it was basically living with my father, who was very strict, very routine based, very, you know, like he had morals and he had rules and he had guidelines and all the rest of it. Routine and all that was a big part of my life. And then once my father got ill with cancer when I was about 6.5, he eventually passed away when I was nearly 10. Yeah, I actually went from having, you know, a childhood of one kind to a complete opposite one, like one that I'd never experienced any of the stuff that I was exposed to once my father died before he died. So it wasn't like I got a warm up to cannabis or a warm up to alcoholics or a warm up to, you know, seeing my mother being in a violent domestic abuse relationship. It wasn't like I got used to having 5 siblings under the same roof. I went from being an only child in a 3-bedroom house with just me and my dad to, yeah, being moved into a 3-bedroom house with my mother, who I'd never met, my stepfather, who I'd never met, and my 5 siblings, who I'd never met. Yeah, they were heavy drinkers, man, and just, yeah, probably a week in, and then just out of nowhere, like click of the fingers, my mother and stepfather were like full belting each other, like, you know, it was like two men fighting, watching my mother fight with my stepfather. And yeah, it was just a massive shock to my system because I'd never seen violence, let alone my mother being the one having it perpetrated upon her and her perpetrating it back upon them in an aggressive manner. So yeah, basically once all that happened that night, I kind of ran away, and, you know, I was upset and I was scared and I didn't want to go back to the house because, you know, my mother had just had her head punched in front of me, and it was just all a bit much for me to take in. But in a way, that's what led me to meeting these other criminals that were older than me, that were, you know, driving around in stolen vehicles. They had there was like a big block of flats across, well, there still is. It's called Winton Court. It's basically about 40 to 60 units that are directly across from where we used to live, and they're just all 1-bedroom units. Once again, lower class sort of living standards. Yeah, that's where it all started, man. That's where I met a lot of the older criminals that, you know, I eventually become really good friends with. And, you know, they groomed me in a sense that, you know, I was 10 and a half years old, running away from home because of all this sort of stuff that I was being exposed to. But yet these older criminals were sort of like realizing that I was in a vulnerable position and being like, well, if he's too scared to go home, as long as we don't scare him more than that, he'll come with us and do whatever we ask him, you know what I mean, sort of thing. So like, and yeah, man, it just, you know, to be honest, it spiraled out of control really quickly. Like I remember when I first went to Ashley's, my father hadn't been deceased 6 months. I hadn't lived with
Wow.
I hadn't lived with my mother and my siblings for 6 months. I hadn't finished primary school, you know, like, and I was being locked in the youth detention centre. So like, it all happened really fast.
From there, man. So you've walked into Ashley's now. So how old were you when you walked in there? Still
So I
10.
was, yeah, I was 4 days over 11 or something when I first went to Ashley's.
And like, how was that whole experience for, again, you know, less than 6 months after, you know, in a very short span of time, now you've ended up in there. So how was that walking in there? And
Oh, brother, like it's, you know, I still do counselling to this day, man, like for that I went through out there and in other parts of the state. But like, yeah, man, like, I don't know how much of my socials and stuff you've seen, brother, but like for
I've
me,
seen, yeah.
um, you know, like I really hope that one day I can, you know, put a business plan on the table and have the sort of backing and support that I'll need in order to get financing and things like that to help make sure that no other kid goes through the sort of shit that me and my mates went through when we first went to Ashley's.
How was it for you during your, because then you got transferred to prison when you were how old, bro? 16, was it?
17, yeah.
So you got transferred to prison when you were 17. So I mean, I mean, in a nutshell, brother, how was that time from 10?
It shaped who I am today, you know, like I take a lot of, I've gotten rid of a lot of negative traits and a lot of negativity that I harbored because of, you know, the last.
Like you said, you're still seeing people now because of you're still speaking to professionals now because of what you went through during that period in your life, isn't it?
100%, yeah. So, yeah, man, it's like, you know, I often think to myself, Dave, like, where would I be? Who would I have become? What would I have achieved? How would my life have turned out if, you know, if I hadn't have spent my whole youth locked in a detention centre that literally had no foundation for rehabilitation, you know? So, like, when I first walked into Ashley's, there was only one unit and it was called the New Wing. This building was the shape of an L, and on the small end of the L was like common area, table tennis table, Coke machine, games room with a PlayStation and another table tennis table. There was a TV room with heaps of chairs and a TV to watch movies and shit, and then the dining area. But the long part of the L shape of the building was literally just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 or 10 cell doors up one big long corridor
Oh,
that
yeah.
housed all 70 detainees of Ashley Detention Centre. You know, there's people up there doing tattoos, there's people up there making, and yeah, like you could just come and
What?
go all day up and down that corridor like it was just, yeah, like, so yeah, like I know a lot of people probably think, you know, youth offenders and offenders in general need to be locked up and need to be mistreated or, you know, shown that it's not okay to do what we do out here in the community and all these things, and that's fine. But yeah, the kind of shit that I went through, man, it was me and my friends, you know, and other people that I know. It wasn't just me. Um, the sexual and emotional and the physical abuse, the traumatic shit that comes with that beyond that. So, like the behaviors that it instills within the victim, the shame and the guilt that comes with it, it sort of, it does. It all compacts in your mind. And like, I've seen so many different people around my age, like obviously I was the youngest, but around my age and up to about 13, 14, just probably between 6 to 10 of us over that time that I spent in Ashley's. I've witnessed them go through very similar stuff to me in terms of the abuse, and it's just completely changed them, like in ways that you know, it's hard to describe. Like I've had friends that have been completely normal. Not saying that being gay or bisexual isn't normal. I'm just saying like they were straight white young men, and then after several years of being continually abused every time we went to that centre, one of my good friends actually turned bisexual, because when you suffer that kind of abuse, you do start questioning your own sexual identity.
You've gone through Ashley's. Unfortunately, you've been housed with, you know, older guys and things like that. You know, people as well. Sexual abuse was common. Physical abuse, things like this. So, I mean, by the time you've escaped at 17, what kind of a person were you by this point from that 10-year-old?
Yeah, so it's a hard one, Dave. You know, like I hate it. It makes me throat dry up even thinking about it. But yeah, you know, I was someone that just I had no happiness in me. You know, like by that point, man, I was literally self-harming in so many different ways without sitting there slashing my wrist. You know what I mean? I've never once slashed my wrist or, you know, done anything like that. But as for self-harm with reckless, careless, dangerous behaviors, and knowing that one reaction has another reaction, knowing how to put myself in hurtful, harmful, and dangerous positions over and over and over and over again, that was how I self-harmed. And it took me a long time to understand that. I wasn't, well, I would have been 25, 26 when it was properly explained to me that basically I was self-harming every day for nearly 13 years. Like I just didn't look at it like that. To me, it was a lifestyle. These were common traits that I had to do, things that I had to express and display to people so that they understood where my mind frame was at and what sort of a person I was. I felt that all these behaviors and these learned things I had to keep displaying and showing, and in order to, you know, make sure people understood my identity. Because like in my head at that age, by the time I was ready to go, well, I wasn't ready, but by the time I was sent to prison, yeah, basically in my mind, man, I was, you know, it sounds stupid, but in my mind, I was like the worst treated. No one loved me. I was never going to amount to anything.
How was it for you, man, walking in there with that chip on your shoulder versus the reality of the yard, you know what I mean? And you walking in there at 17 years old. How was that?
Yeah, so, you know, I had a bit of a unique introduction to the prison system, because we'd escaped. Me and my mate, or five of us actually escaped on the night, but me and my best mate were the ones that were doing the escape, and the other three basically just come with us. But yeah, because I'd overpowered one of the Ashley workers, locked him in my cell, and let the rest of the detainees out of the secure unit that we were housed in at Ashley's. Yeah, when the police actually caught up with me and my co-offender, because we were 17 and a bit, and it was now the 6th time he'd escaped and 7th or 8th time that I'd escaped from Ashley's.
Wow.
Yeah, they'd basically just turned around and said, well, basically once they're apprehended, they will not come back into the juvenile system. They'll be taken to the Hobart Reception Prison and then transferred later on into the mainstream adult prison. And I'll never forget it, King Dave. When we walked into the remand centre, right, there was this massive, big, tall screw. I won't say his name, but everyone hates him. He's just a cockhead thing because he's fucking 6'4" and 120 kilo, and he's big supervisor. He just thinks he's fucking tough cunt. Anyway, me and my mate have like got off the bus and we're sitting in the cells, like dressed in our like normal clothes. And we're sort of just sitting there, and he comes storming in and fucking tells us to stand up, and we both just sort of look at each other like, fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're just into hostilities immediately, you know what I mean? Because this cunt's just stormed in trying to straight away be like, do as you're told, you're in jail now. And we just sort of looked at each other like, fuck this goose, and just stayed sitting down. And then he's like, oh, you know, really tried to intimidate us and put it on us and tell us that things weren't going to be the same here as they were at Ashley's, and, you know, rah. And that was all good. We sort of just sat there and like just laughed at him, really, just shrugged it off, listened to the introduction, and that was that. But little did we know, at 17 years old, everything that he was saying was fucking dead on the money, mate. Like, they, in their minds, like even right now, Dave, like I've got a civil lawsuit against our state government for the way in which I was treated and handled and whatnot when I was a juvenile. Like the government, they're still sending back emails and like undermining what they done to me and how they treated me and where they housed me and who they housed me with. And they're just like, oh, he was a, you know, serious violent offence. We had to, like, I was a child. Like,
Yeah, no, exactly.
it doesn't matter that I was doing all these things and I was 17, like I was still a child. Yeah, after we had our little introduction downstairs, man, they basically said, oh, look, you're going to be housed in a 6-man division on level 4 of the remand centre. And we were just like, yep, whatever, too easy. Anyway, we've gone up to the level 4 with them. And yeah, when we've walked in there, they've introduced us to the other 3 inmates that were being housed there. And we didn't like know that we were actually being housed with other inmates because we'd just overpowered a worker and been on the run for fucking nearly 2 weeks and all these things. We just presumed we'd be locked down. But no, we literally just got taken up there, shown ourselves, introduced to the other 3 adults that were being housed in there, and left there. That was that. They just walked off and left us there. Yeah, like I said, man, bit of a unique circumstance for myself and my best mate because we were both 17. We're only 11 days apart in age. And yeah, when they walked off, they had just locked 2 underage. So we were both 17 still. They'd just locked 2 of our state's worst developing youth offenders in a room no bigger than this. So like this is just a normal size lounge room. In a room no bigger than this, with our state's most violent, notorious, repeat criminal sex offender. Like he's basically just an all-round fucking animal, psycho. Like, you know what I mean? This bloke has killed people, he rapes people. There's 2 people on missing persons posters in our city alone that he is the key suspect in their disappearance. He's been the head of one of our most notorious jail gangs for 15, 20 years. Yeah, man, over that next 5 weeks, Dave, it was definitely the most trying 5 or 6 weeks of my life at the time, you know, just because I'd been through so much already as a young boy. in a detention centre that was poorly managed, poorly run, and just, you know, being, like, as I said at the start, being housed with all these older criminals all the time, not just once, not just twice, but like every time I went there, there was a different dynamic to how poorly the place was being run. So, like, naturally, my rehabilitation and me getting better, it just wasn't happening. Like, whether I was out in the community or back inside the detention centre. Yeah, like I said, it was the most challenging and trying 5 or 6 weeks of my life at the time. And eventually, man, things just got the better of me. And yeah, we was in our cells one night. And, you know, you got to understand, after 5, 6 weeks of being bashed, bullied, picked on, assaulted, traumatized, and tortured. You know, we won't go into it too much on here, but all the sick shit that he was doing to me, like, no one else would have lasted 5, 6 weeks of, you know, being bashed and tortured and abused every day, to the point that I didn't get 5 minutes out of the 8 hours that we would come out of our cells without him in my face, in my ear, you know, choking me, punching me, pinching me, burning me, tipping hot water on me, like just knocking me out and choking me and doing all this shit to me every single day. It just got to the point where I snapped, man. And yeah, basically, I was in my cell one night and he was just saying some rancid, horrid, putrid shit to me. And yeah, I just snapped, Dave. Like, I couldn't handle it anymore. And yeah, I eventually smashed my way out of my cell and caused about $30,000 damage to the unit that we'd been housed in for the last 5 weeks. And yeah, long story short, they removed me from there, obviously by force. And then I was housed downstairs for about 5 days, just right near the officers' station in the remand centre, while they cleaned up all the mess I'd made and moved the other 5 detainees around out of that unit because it was now inoperable. And yeah, probably wasn't even 2 weeks after I'd done that, I was still in lockdown for doing that. And I was sitting on the phone having a phone call, and one of my mates taps on the window, and I look up and he's holding a sign up saying, "Get ready, we're about to riot." And I was just sort of like, how? You know, like, I'm sitting here on a phone in a pair of handcuffs, like, and yous are locked in there. But anyway, they ended up ripping the medication trolley off of the staff when they come at tea time that night. And yeah, over the next 5 hours, it took about an hour, hour and a half for them to help get me out of my cell. Afterwards, they had to smash like down the wall next to the door frame and shit, because I'd come out the windows of the door the first time. They were now plastic perspex and we couldn't smash them out. So we literally had to smash a hole out of the wall next to the big steel door frame. But yeah, basically, man, after 6 hours of rioting, we surrendered because there was 5 blokes that were actually unconscious and non-responsive from all the medication that they'd taken out of the inmate trolley.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and you know, naturally we wanted to get the people out of there that were overdosing in case they died, but
Yeah, fair
the
enough.
tactical group are just like, either you all surrender or they can die. Basically, that's what they said. Like, we don't care. You aren't just sending out the people that are overdosing. You either all lay face down and surrender, or we're not taking anyone out until we work out how we're going to end this. So the ones of us that were basically in charge of the riot just said, "Nah, fuck that. We're surrendering, because if one of these poor bastards die, you know what I mean, the people that didn't let everyone else out are going to be the ones held accountable." So, like, yeah, we just surrendered. And that was when, you know, I thought that my introduction to jail couldn't have got any worse. You know, I'd been locked in with this fucking animal that just wanted to torture me and abuse me and all this shit. It had been like the hardest 6 weeks of my life. And I thought that going to the jail, the actual jail, because we were in the remand centre, would be a positive change. I knew heaps of people over there and had heaps of friends and all the rest of it. And then I find out, like when we get transferred that night, before 8 o'clock the next morning, I'd been informed that, you know, I'd just been housed in the remand centre with our state's most hated, most wanted, and most hunted inmate. He was actually over there for super protection because he'd become the centre of a correctional officer trying to smuggle a loaded 9mm handgun into the prison for the other southern gang to use to kill this man. Like, that's how dangerous he was. Like, that the other gang were actually going to bring a gun into the jail. A correctional officer got nearly 6 years for it. Like, he actually got done doing it. So between the correctional officer and 5 others, I think they got nearly 20 years between them all, like for trying to bring that gun into the jail. So basically I turned 18 in solitary. So once we had the riot and then moved to the jail, several of us, including me, got housed in super maximum, which is called Huon down here in Tasmania. And yeah, basically after about 2 weeks of being locked in this super maximum unit after the riot at the remand centre, we're now in 2008 at this point. So we're a couple of weeks into the new year. And yeah, same deal. I ended up having just, yeah, meltdown after meltdown once I got solitary, because it was just, yeah, like I said, man, when I got there, I was just being reminded by every single prisoner that would be able to speak to me, whether they seen me walking through the spine or I was out exercising and they were walking past or this and that. It was just, oh, Caine, what were you doing over there with him? You're dead, mate. You're dead. Oh, the Southerners are going to kill you. Oh, mate, what were you doing in there with him? Like, and it's all I kept hearing. So it just kept like fueling my bad behaviour, because I was just like, how am I being targeted now by the other gang that's at war with the cunt that just fucking tortured me for 6 weeks? How are they now targeting me? He just fucking tortured me for 6 weeks. It was a fuck situation, man. And like, yeah, once I turned 18 in solitary, it got to a point now where I knew that right or wrong, I was going to have to fight once I got down to the mainstream yards, simply because the Southern gang believed that I was all buddy-buddy with the gang leader of the Northern gang, who had now snitched half of their gang in and got them nearly 20 years. You know what I mean? And they think I'm over there being chummy with it. Like, so it was just...
That's bad news, all right? That's all bad.
Oh, fuck, man. But, yeah, so I ended up doing like 15 or 16 months that lagging, 15 to 18 months on remand at all those 3 places. I applied for Supreme Court bail and was granted it. On one of these dates between me getting out on the 20th and being rearrested on the 26th, some males that were known to me and were close to me in a sense were involved in a tragic incident that left one bloke deceased and another male seriously injured. And yeah, one of those men unfortunately died, and yeah, I was implicated in that murder along with 4 others. And yeah, after being out on Supreme Court bail for 6 days, I was rearrested on Boxing Day 2008 and charged with murder and taken straight back. So
like Stacey had been out.
Yeah, 6 days. So it was a bit of a shit situation, but you know, like, looking back, man, I don't regret doing that 9 months. You know, I was on a 10 o'clock curfew. This happened at 11 at night or something. The police had checked my curfew. I was asleep both times. They come 27 minutes apart. Like there was ample time for the police to make sure I didn't go to jail for 9 months, but they weren't
They weren't
interested in me.
interested. They weren't interested. They weren't interested in that, especially seeing they had just gotten out. They definitely wanted you back in ASAP. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it's we know, you know what I mean, bro. Like
yeah,
we know the yeah. Well, you know, it is again Tassie. It's just, man, it sounds crazy down there. I mean, well, look, bro, like from there, so you've like when did it all? I guess when did it all start to change for you? Like when did that initiate? You know, because it sounds like a miracle. It sounds like a miracle. Well, really, it's a miracle for any of us, say, to really turn our backs on that life. You know what I mean? Well,
oh man,
you know the statistics, man. You know, like
fuck
I mean,
yeah.
how did that penny drop for you?
So basically, Dave, man, it got to a point like I know everyone sort of has their own expression or their own little speech for how they turned their life around, or what brought about that change in the mindset to want to try and change and all these things. But for me personally, man, I don't think it was any one thing. It was a combination of several things. It was I had got to a point in my life where I couldn't stand the sight of myself anymore. I honestly, if I heard my own voice, I would fucking fly into a fit of rage. Like I, I was just suicidal that last 3.5 years. Like, so the two sieges that I had, there was one in 2016 and there was one in 2018. And it led to me trying to hang myself and wanting to force police to shoot me and just all this crazy shit because I couldn't see a way out. I couldn't see myself going back to prison and then coming out and making the changes I need to make to live a normal life, because I'd been in and out of prison 25 times or 26 times, I worked out the other day. I just couldn't see it.
Yep. Well, so you've gone through that first police siege, and then you said you've had a second one. So what's happened during the second one and after that?
I was in a relationship that I probably should never have been in to start with, and it turned really toxic once I got out of prison after that first siege. And yeah, I tried my hardest to rectify everything to get on top of it, but I spiraled back out of control, got back on the drugs, and really let it take a handle on my life again. And once it all sort of went away and I realised the sort of lifestyle that I'd created for myself again, and that I was stuck being a drug addict again, that I was stuck doing the wrong thing again, and that I was surrounded by all these people that would happily see me live my life like this for the rest of my life, it really ate me up, man. And, you know, I thought I was suicidal and in a bad headspace that first time round. The second time round was just so much more intense. And I knew when the police were surrounding my house and the negotiators were talking to me to try and get me out of the house, I knew within my mind, Dave, that once I got inside a prison cell after I got out of this house, it'd be the last time that I stepped foot in one again. I just knew, like, it was just after everything I'd been through and all the challenges I'd overcome and all the fucking scary shit that I'd had to face, it was just like a switch in my mind. Like, I just knew, listening to the cops' radios outside my house and listening to them talk about how they were going to get me out of the house and all this stuff, I just realised really quickly, right then and there, that my life was amounting to nothing and I was wasting more talent than I care to touch on. You know what I mean? Like, I've got the ability to do just about anything I put my mind to in this world, in this life. And here I was leaving this criminal legacy, criminal lifestyle for my daughter to have to navigate as she gets older. You know, like everyone in this small place knows my name, and they only know up until the last 3.5 years bad things. They only have bad stories to tell. They only have bad memories to share. And you know, if my kid's going to grow up in this state, I don't want that to be my legacy. I don't, you know, I want to be the face of change, not the face of pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%, brother. I mean, it's awesome to see what you've been able to overcome, man. I mean, it's heartbreaking stuff, bro. And I mean, it sounds like they definitely need it out your way. You know, people like you that are standing up and voicing their opinions. Like, what is life looking like for you nowadays, brother? And what are some of your future goals and kicking down there in Tassie?
Brother, so many. I've got my whiteboard and that right here beside me, just in case.
Nice.
um, so yeah, man, in the last few weeks, things have really amped up a lot in the youth work and the diversionary, the troubled youth diversionary work that I've been trying to get involved in. So yeah, of late, man, I've just put my application in for my working with vulnerable people's card. Yeah, so since I got released in 2019, my long-term goal or intermediate goal has been to crack into that career path, you know, working with troubled and disadvantaged youth. I'm happy to work with adults as well, but I just find my passion is more with the youth. But I'm easy either way. Helping someone's helping someone. I don't care if they're young, old, elderly. It makes no difference to me. If I'm improving their quality of life, it's empowering them. It's empowering me, and I'm happy with that result, no matter who it is, no matter how old they are. Just based on that work there with APM, I was reached out to from the Brain Injury Association of Tasmania. They run a program called Custody for Life. This program is linked in with Tasmania Police, Tasmania Community Youth Justice, and Tasmania Community Corrections. Now, basically, what the Custody for Life program entails is it's people from Brain Injury Association of Tasmania, Tas Police, all them other organisations I just named, all coming into one, and they've created the Custody for Life program to help all these juveniles that have come into the system, whether it's foster care, needing help financially for whatever reason, being linked in with all the service providers that are hooked in with Centrelink, like APM, have been in custody on bail for minor offences, have been to Ashley's. Basically, as soon as they reach some point on some scale, they are then eligible to go into this Custody for Life program. And it's aimed at explaining to these children that, you know, a brain injury can come about in so many ways.
Well, look, I mean, we're sort of coming to the end here, my bro. So,
No worries, my man.
brother Caine, it's been awesome having you on the show and being able to hear where you're coming from and where you're going. Definitely, the same battle we're all fighting here. You know, they say that you can sort of judge a nation by the way that they treat their most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I mean, on a world scale, it's not looking good, brother. You know what I mean? It's definitely not looking good. So, you know, luckily there's soldiers like us, man, that are definitely willing to stand on the front line with no fear at all, mate. No backward steppers, brother.
No, that's it, my man. It's the only way to be.
All right, man. Again, man, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. I'll leave your links in the description. So if you want to get a hold of the brother here, and I'm sure a lot of people will, I'll leave the link in the description so you can reach out to the bro here.
No worries, brother. Much love, man. Thank you so much for getting me on the Felon podcast.
Cheers, brother.